Welcome to the Future Hero Podcast. My name is Baxter. Thank you for pressing play. I bring different offerings on this podcast, and one of the 3 or 4 that I offer is interviews. And I've been lucky enough to interview some people that are close to me, mostly Hoopers so far. But I'm really, really excited to bring this next interview. And this will probably be more interview than conversation. One of my I don't know. I'm honestly a fan of my guest, to be honest. His name is Adam Deipert. If you're from the flow world like me, you probably know him as a flow artist. But he, like all of us, has many different layers and projects in mind. And we're going to talk about one of his projects today. And I mean, I've been trying to get him interviewed forever on my podcast. I asked him like long time ago. And we were never able to work it out with our schedules. But then I was at a party this past weekend, and Adam was talking about his new project, which is what I want to focus on today. And I was just blown away and was like, I wish we were at my studio right now. And so I mentioned to Adam, I said, Adam, is there any way we can make this happen? And 3 or 4 days later, you're here. And so I want to welcome Adam. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
And I really am just stoked to have you here. I'll give a little history for people. I don't remember when we met, but I definitely had known about you before. And we're both we're not both from, but we live in North Carolina. And you live in Raleigh, and I live in Chapel Hill, which are really close to each other, like 30 minutes away. And I had known about you being this flow person, but like, I've been so entrenched in hooping that I haven't necessarily paid attention to the art that's being made in other flow worlds. Like I know them and I respect them and all that. But like as far as like knowing what they do, I didn't really know. And I remember the first time I saw you perform, I'm pretty sure it was at the Flojo. Mm-hmm. Would that have been possible?
That's possible.
Okay, I think that's where it was. And I saw you do your act and was just blown away by it, honestly. I was just every part of it, I remember digging. I mean, I'm not a super tech guy, but I really respect it. I'm just not drawn into it, but it was super technical. But then it was also just flowy, which is what I'm into. And I really saw your personality and how you put your show together, and so that sort of hooked me. And, I had FlowSpect for you at that point. And then I got to know you. And we had a couple of talks, and I think you guys will see as this talk goes on that, I really enjoy the way you express. And I also enjoy, and this is the bulk of what we're going to get into is your emphasis on science. And just, I'm not from the science world, but I have a mad respect for it, and I'm one of those people that I think we're growing in number, but I'm one of those sort of spiritual science people. Mm-hmm. Like that doesn't see this tug of war between the two at all. But actually, like, for me, spirituality is our context in life. Mm. And science explains the context.
Right. Yeah, it's not for describing spirituality.
Right.
It's just not the type of question it's designed to answer.
Right. And I just love its ability or its willingness almost to be wrong. As much as to be right,
It's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah.
You can prove it wrong.
Totally. Well, can you give us a little bit of background about sort of, who is Adam Deipert and just a little bit of bio?
Yeah. So I grew up mostly in Ohio and on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And just to jump right into like the really hard part that motivated who I became is that when I was 15, my father died from cancer.
I'm sorry.
And when that happened, I had this deep appreciation for the life that I was currently living. And as I thought about it, I was just like, okay, that's going to happen to me, but it hasn't happened yet. Let's go. Game on. Let's do this.
Right. And that was at 15.
And that was at 15. So, I was reading like, Thich Nhat Hanh and Dalai Lama and a bunch of Eastern philosophy books. And so that really helped to lead me to comfort with the situation. And then life goes on. High school's hard. When I was a senior in high school, I got kicked out of my house and had to move into an apartment and graduate high school on my own, which, I still had a loving family and they were totally awesome and definitely gave me support, but that was a tough moment. And it was during that moment, the reason I bring this up is that it was during that moment when I was living in an apartment by myself that kind of realized who I was hanging out with and I just needed to change my friend set. And so I was just like, yo, y'all got to go. I need something different in order to make this work. And it was during that time that I ended up kind of like going through all my things again and I found my flower sticks. And I'm just hanging out in my apartment, 18 years old, start playing with the flower sticks, start really getting into it. I start seeing the relationship between cylinders interacting with other cylinders and how they're rolling on top of each other and visualizing how that interaction occurs. I was taking a physics class at the time, and so the relationship between the center of mass of the object and its angular momentum was a very relevant thing that I was actively moving with. And within, I don't know, maybe 6 months, I had worn out my Crystal Sticks VHS. Right?
Perfect.
It was all lines, you barely hear the audio, all that stuff. And I just realized this was super important. It satisfied my mathematical interest. It satisfied my physical interest. I had been a soccer player all through my youth. I played instruments. I did art. I did lots of math. And this just satisfied all of those things for me. And so yeah, I was just in like small town Ohio, and I realized that I was going to dedicate myself to this. And later I ended up meeting somebody. My mom got remarried and I got a new sister, and she had been doing Renaissance festivals, and we were talking about this, and I'm telling her, man, this thing is just so important. And I just, it's valuable. And I have to do this. And she was like, oh yeah, the other people are like that too. And I was like, oh, the other people are like that? And she said, yeah, you should come meet them. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So when I was 19, I got rid of all of the things in my apartment. I moved into a van. I went to Wisconsin, hooked up with the Renaissance Festival, and then I spent 2002 to 2005 traveling around the country, going to meet every single object manipulator who would spend time working on this thing with me. And this was before YouTube, so like you really had to go out there and meet the people.
Yeah, you did.
And
Yeah, you did.
I started out with Renaissance festivals. I moved on to county fairs and state fairs. And then in 2004 was when the first circus asked me to come be a teacher and to work with them in Somerville, Massachusetts.
And so what were you teaching? What was that?
Flower sticks. By that time, as I was doing all this traveling, people were putting contact juggling balls in my hands. I got to learn that with Michael and Jennifer Savageau from, Sphere Play.
Shout out.
Yeah. Oh, man. They're good people.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing the circus stuff is when I really felt at home. Like that was what I was looking for. And so then kind of I just reformatted what I was representing myself as, in my own internal world, and being focused more around circus. Because, telling somebody you're an object manipulator doesn't really tell people anything. Right? In a sense,
no,
like,
they don't
okay,
really
you
know what to do
manipulate
with it.
objects, but like, so I was doing Diabolo and rope dart and, spinning fire and doing all of these things, and stilt walking and rolling globe, and just really like spending a lot of time on all of them. And yeah, so that happened. I started school at Ohio State to get my bachelor's degree. My mom talked me into it in 2005. So I said, okay, all right, I'll give this a try. And what was crazy about this is that I'm going through my classes and I arrive at the point, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do like physics or chemistry or mathematics as my major. And I get to the point that I'm in multivariable calculus. And this is calculus talking about curves moving through 3 dimensions, and like how do you calculate the tangent to the line and the normal, which is like perpendicular to the direction that it's going, and how do you calculate things about surfaces interacting. And it was at that moment that I was just like, man, y'all are talking about the same thing I'm talking about. right?
Right.
Like this is the same. It's not even different slightly.
Right.
It's just how you say it. But then also I found out I could do the math, and I was in this really exceptional class with a lot of very intelligent, very motivated people. I became really good friends with that professor, and she was like, man, that class was very unique. Every student in there was motivated. And so,
Right.
way more than half of any success is a group effort, right? And like
for
it's
sure.
a community, and I just keep ending up in these situations where I got this amazing people around me
Right.
who are doing incredible things, and that was one of them. And so that's when my dedication both to object manipulation and mathematics really got intertwined. And I realized that I had been spending all of this time exercising these physical and mathematical principles through my body, and that I was seeing it in the world that I was interacting with. And there are a lot of kinesthetic learners in the world who are not being taken care of in math classes. And that the number of people who are good at math is larger than the number of people who think that they're good at math.
Absolutely.
And it is a matter of communication, and it is a matter of telling the story in a way that is interesting and telling it in a way that is understandable to each person.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things that I've been working on pretty intensely. And and just throw in the little bit, I have a mathematics course for high school and early college students where I teach them how to spin poi. And then we go sit at computers, and they learn how to do trigonometry, and they learn how to do computer programming, and they learn about operations on functions, so that they can express the things that we were doing with the poi in a mathematical manner.
Yeah.
And so so then we go back to movement, then we go back to computers, then we go back to movement. And so by moving back and forth between them, both we stay engaged in our body, we stay engaged in our social interactions, because I don't sit them at a computer alone. They're always at the computer in teams. And I have seen 12-year-olds go through this, coming out after 4 hours like, wait, Mom, wait, I'm not ready to get picked up. Like, I just got to do this one last
That's
thing.
nice.
You know?
That's great.
And it feels like it's like really what I want.
Yeah, it's like I remember, somebody said to me once that, I don't know if they actually said this or if my memory just distorted it, but basically it was like philosophy is just intellectual farting until you see it in real life.
Okay.
And I kind of like...
Is it okay to laugh at a fart joke? Or
It
not?
is okay.
Okay.
Yeah. No, well, I hope it is, because I just told one. But no, I like I can totally see how, because I think that, like, hearing your story, I'm guilty of not thinking I'm good at math. I mean, I almost went to the North Carolina School of Science and Math by some fluke. But I'm guilty of not thinking that I'm mathematical. And I think, I don't know, I guess I have kid envy right now, because I think, like, if I had felt the force that my physics teacher was trying to tell me about, or if I had felt the changes in inertia, obviously I'm revealing how little I know about these phrases, but, like, if I could have felt that, I think it would have it would have gone from intellectual whatever to, real life, applications and things like that. And I want to, because I don't want to hop over this, because so much of this new project that we're going to get into is about dance. And I've seen your show, and I've seen you move. And then I know, because we share the same community in ecstatic dance, that you're a wonderful dancer, and that you do contact improv. And so clearly you're a dancer. I mean, do you self-identify as that?
I do identify as a zero gravity dancer.
Okay.
I think I work really hard on dance. I surround myself with really exceptional dancers. And so I have had the opportunity of maintaining a position where I am around people who are better than me at the thing that I want to be good at.
Really?
And so, out of the Giant Leap project, I feel like the least experienced dancer.
Well, I mean, after looking at the website and seeing who all is involved, I can see why you would feel that way.
And I'm down.
Heavyweights, heavyweights, yeah. Well, but what I'm hearing before we get into the Giant Leap, which is the next question, is it almost seems like you're saying that dance is a skill that you want to learn, but it's not. Do you feel natural as a dancer?
I feel embodied.
Okay.
And I feel
Okay.
that my physical experience is of great interest to me. And I have now made a career for 18 straight years where I have made most or all of my money every single year on using my body in front of other people in order to demonstrate the skills that I've been developing. And honestly, so that what I'm not actually is a performer.
Really?
Yeah, that
Huh.
actually is what I have to work on. That's the hardest part of it all for me.
Huh.
I can learn skills. I can be endlessly interested in digging into a complicated thing. And the act of going out in front of people to share that thing is something that I have had to work on the entire time. And I have arrived at a kind of sequence of internal experiences that result in my best performances occurring when anything that was going on in my life kind of slides away when I get there. That as I'm putting on the makeup and as I'm putting on the costumes, I'm becoming who I am when I am in that state. And when I go out onto the stage, I look out into the audience and I see a lot of intelligent, emotional, connected brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and children who deserve respect and are giving me the opportunity to have their attention for a moment. And when I realize how powerful all of those people are and that they are giving me their attention for 3 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever it is, my responsibility is to just really show up. And so when I really show up, I become ultra present. When I throw each ball, it is just that ball. When I'm moving my foot to reposition on my rolling globe, I am just moving my foot. And that state of being right now, all the way, with nothing else in my mind or my heart, except for where we're at together, is actually the thing that I think I'm selling. And so...
How does training prepare you for that? Or does it? I would think that it would.
You're thinking about movement training?
Yeah, like your practice, does it make you more present? How does your practice work to make that moment happen better?
Yeah, so there is a little less intensity in it when I'm practicing.
Of course.
Yeah, but I do get those moments of extreme presence. And the thing about training is that you're still a whole person, right? You still have a lot of emotions. You still have a hurt elbow. You still have all of the weird stuff that people have told you about your body that you have to deal with.
Right.
Right? I mean, man, we need to give more credit to how powerful our words affect our internal experience of our own bodies, right?
Absolutely.
And that's part of what you have to get through when you're training, right? Is accepting all of that stuff and figuring out how you use it to accomplish the task that you're ready to accomplish. And of course, right, training is like sometimes just skill building. You just have to do the work to be able to do the thing that you want to do.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like in training is when it's like my nice little bubble and I like to just go into the studio by myself and I just go in there from 10 p.m. to 1 in the morning or whatever, and I just hide out and I can drop and I can throw and I can listen to whatever music I want. And so, yeah, I guess the training is about manipulating your mind and manipulating your body into becoming, and maybe it's even about expressing the things that you need to express in order to refine the craft into being what you wish to share, right? That like, whatever, there's, you know, the metaphor or the quote about like, you know, you don't create a statue out of the piece of marble. You like find the statue inside of the piece of marble, right?
Yeah,
and so in this case, I mean, as I'm expressing this right now, maybe, an important part of training is figuring out, what are the little channels that are the ones that you're going to bring out and share with everybody? Because the truth is everybody doesn't want to see everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Well,
doesn't add value to their life.
Exactly. And I want to make sure that I've fully developed the character here, because speaking of training, like, I think we haven't mentioned this yet. You sort of alluded to it earlier, but you're a science guy, and you are in the midst of pretty rigorous academic training. You want to talk about where you're at and what you've been working on?
Yeah. So I just finished my PhD.
Congratulations, man. Everybody always gets the biggest smile. It must be a great feeling.
Oh, man. I was in graduate school for 9 years.
My God.
They kind of warned me about that at the beginning when I accepted this project. But it's like experimental nuclear physics, and everybody else, I don't know. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, is the truth of it. They said, yeah, here's the experiment. You want to work on it. And so kind of just, I don't know how many other aspiring scientists there are out there, but I just will throw this out. Like, when I first started looking at graduate schools, I got accepted to one where I was going to just go work at CERN right away. That's a huge hadron collider in Geneva.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they were like, you'll take 9 months of courses, and then we're going to send you over there, and you'll spend the rest of graduate school at CERN. And, that sounds fine. It's a big, famous project and everything. But when I started thinking about it, I was like, there are 3,000 scientists there, and they're working on the biggest machine that humans have ever built.
Right.
And I want to touch the machine. I want to work on the machine. And it then did not sound all that appealing, right?
Right.
And so I had opportunities to work at Jefferson Lab and then to work at Oak Ridge in graduate school. And eventually I found this project here at Duke and NC State, and I was just going to work with 4 people in the lab, and then there's kind of a slightly larger group of nuclear scientists that we work with. That's maybe about 10 people, and then there's like a larger group of about 40 people, and so it kind of goes in these tiers. And I went in there, man, and after a year, I was pretty much in charge of my experiment, and I learned how to do machining. I did a lot of electronics development. I can take my entire experiment completely apart and put the entire thing back together on my own, and I know every wire, and I know every connector, and I resoldered half of them myself, and that's what I wanted. That's why I did experimental physics instead of theoretical physics. And I think a lot of people kind of, hold the theoretical physicists up on a pedestal, and they deserve it. They're incredibly intelligent people to make successes in that manner. But when you have to build a way of testing whether or not matter is responding in some way or not, it is a totally different beast.
Yeah.
And it's the kind I'm interested in.
Nice.
So I do cryogenic studies on polarized helium-3. So my coldest I have made something is 0.07 Kelvin. To give you a reference, our environment is about 300 Kelvin.
Oh, man.
Outer space is 2.7 Kelvin. And so I work at 0.07 Kelvin.
Wow.
And actually, I don't work at it a whole lot. I think the lowest actual, real experiment that ended up in my dissertation was at 0.6. And so things are a lot different there. We use superconductors. So these are wires that have no resistance inside of them. And so current can just continue flowing through them. And I've specialized in a electronic device called a superconducting quantum interference device, which is the most sensitive magnetic field detector that humans can build right now. And they're very sensitive. They really pick up a lot of electromagnetic noise. And so yeah, that I feel is my major contribution to this experiment that I'm working on. And the bigger experiment is that we are studying a thing called the neutron electric dipole moment. How you can think about it if you're not a scientist is that we have a lot of evidence that a Big Bang may have occurred. I think people take it for granted, and we kind of just believe that a Big Bang occurred, but you should definitely be skeptical about anything anybody tells you.
Okay.
And there's about 4 or 5 really solid pieces of evidence that make it clear. Like there's inflation, right? And so all of the stars are moving away from us, and there's a redshift. Hubble constant is a thing, so that is accelerating as you go farther away from our point in the universe. The cosmic microwave background is uniform in all directions to within a very small amount, and so that kind of demonstrates that things seem to have been smaller at some time. The one other thing that is relevant is that the amount of small atoms that were created in the initial Big Bang theory are consistent with the amount of small atoms that we see in the universe. And so those are some of the really solid things. That's the real reasons we believe in the Big Bang.
Right.
One thing that isn't consistent is that we don't see equal amounts of matter and antimatter in the universe. Antimatter is kind of like matter, but it's is an opposite. So for example, there's an electron that has a negative charge, and then there is its antimatter particle, which has a positive charge. But other than that, they're the same. And so we don't see where all the antimatter went. And so finding out more about the electric dipole moment of the neutron is a way to try to figure out what might have happened in order to cause its evolution to be different, as in the evolution of antimatter through time. And just to be clear, antimatter and dark energy are not the same thing. Some people get confused about that, but they're all kind of different. And I understand that might have got a little sciencey, but
well, that's okay. How lofty of a goal is this? Are we looking at 100 years from now or 5 years from now before we figure this out, or?
So there's some inconsistencies between what the standard model predicts, which is the model of physics that we use mostly, and then if you include some other theories, and so we're basically just probing some range to see if it might fit in there, but we'll find out, and we validate or invalidate some theory.
Well, I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that because, I feel like now we sort of have a good sort of, we've triangulated here and we have a good way to sort of push up into our 3D, no pun intended given what we're about to talk about, but let's talk about Giant Leap, because that's, to me, like, it just seems even more apparent right now that this is kind of like where we were going, or, where your life was kind of, and I'm not even one of those purpose driven guys so much, but like, it just seems like this was a natural convergence and point. So can you give us you could start with an elevator pitch or whatever. Just let us hear about Giant Leap.
Yeah. I just have to say about what you were just mentioning also is that, science and art and dance and object manipulation are the same thing. It's humans who break it up. And I was told that by Story Musgrave, who is the most embodied astronaut that I've ever seen. And I got to talk to him a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And he was just like, man, it's people who break that stuff up.
Nice.
Naturally it's not that way. And so, so for me, it's all one thing.
Right on.
And, so Giant Leap is a dance company that I have founded with Allegra Sura-Labelle, and we are the first zero-gravity dance company in the United States. And our objective is to explore human body movement and weightlessness on all of the many levels that can be explored. Kind of as we've been talking, I've mentioned some things about what it means to be a whole human, and we're not leaving any of those parts out. And we definitely see an opportunity to frame the discussion about being a human in space. Right now, there have been humans in space since November 2nd, 2000. That's about 6,700 days. And have you heard anybody else talking about what the human is experiencing in space?
Not really.
Exactly.
Not really.
But if we're going to talk about people being there, then let's talk about people being there.
Right, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Like, science is great, satellites are great, they're all really important. But we need to go be there. And part of that is an expansion of what we experience as humans. An expansion in what you can see, which is exceptionally important, because if you can't see things, they don't normally feel real.
Right, for sure.
And then also internally, our physical experience is going to be modified through that.
And because what we're talking about, just to make sure we've really delineated this, is gravity versus zero gravity.
Yeah. And so this, I find a lot of people are like, wait, zero gravity? What does that mean? So in one sense, there is not actually zero gravity.
There's microgravity, right?
There's microgravity, exactly.
Okay.
So gravity permeates everywhere in the universe, and we don't have an anti-gravity chamber. There's nothing that we know of that cancels it. And so basically, what you end up doing is you just get your vehicle to be in just the right relationship to the Earth that, relative to your vehicle, you don't experience a strong pool of gravity. And then that is what we call zero gravity.
Do we feel that on like some of these like really steep water rides and like at roller coasters and stuff like that? Is it like what somebody might feel on that? Is it any relation to what you feel?
Yeah. So and if you're on a roller coaster and you kind of hit the top, right, there's like that moment of lifting up. The difference in that is that you are aware that you're falling, right? And you're like feeling the wind and everything.
For sure.
And when
Okay.
you're in an airplane or when you're in a spaceship, not that I can say exactly what it's like to be in a spaceship. I haven't been in a spaceship. Well, I haven't been in a spaceship when it was flying.
In orbit.
You end up reaching this state where you're not falling, right? By falling equally in every direction, you then aren't concerned about that thing. And so it completely changes your physical experience. There is no preferred direction. In zero-G dance terms, we refer to that, what we have on Earth is a local vertical. So you have a direction that is preferred. And in zero gravity, you get to choose whatever you want. And, maybe long term, what it's going to be is you need an orientation on a spaceship so that people's minds can just handle it. But maybe the capacity to really learn how to think in all orientations is something that is achievable. And that is a task that I'm very interested in. This thing where, you see, say, a cup or something laying on the ground, right? If you see it, it's almost always going to be on its top, on its bottom, or at an angle. Right?
Right.
And you have a lot of experience with that. Like all of your experience of cups is like that. And so you can identify a cup in almost any orientation, right? Like
Right.
however it's laying there, you have a understanding of what it is.
Right.
And so this task where objects get rotated, can you still identify what they are? Right?
Sure.
That's a relevant thing.
Sure. And so what is, I want to talk about the parabolic flights and all that, but what is the difference, just so I can understand? Like, let's say you're out in a space station. What is the difference between that sort of feeling of weightlessness and what you're feeling on these parabolic airplane flights?
Yeah. So a parabolic airplane flight is when you take an airplane and you fly it kind of in like a sine wave, right? So it's like going up and down and up and down. And if you use your hand to make that gesture, you'll notice that there is a point right in the middle as you're going toward the top, right? You're halfway up to the top. That actually, if you want to keep following the curve, you have to start pointing your fingers more down than they were a moment before. And so when the airplane flies in that trajectory, that moment, as soon as it starts tilting its nose down, is actually when the zero-G starts.
Okay.
And then you go over the top, all in zero-G, and then you come down over the other side. And then when the nose starts coming back up is when the zero-G ends.
Okay.
So you get about 25 to 28 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a short window.
It's a short window, man. Definitely, once it starts, it is time to get on it, right? Like if you got a task, man, it's time to go. There ain't no time to wait.
Well, how many times how many rises and does it do? Like how many weightless moments are there in a course of a flight?
Yeah, so you get on the U.S. flight. So there's a company called Zero-G Corporation, and they do 15 parabolas total, and then you get 1 Mars gravity, which is 1/3 of Earth's gravity. You get 2 lunar gravities, right, on the moon. That's 1/6 of Earth's gravity, and then you do 12 zero gravity. And so you kind of like go into it slowly,
Nice.
right?
Okay.
And it's really fun. Lunar gravity is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you can
definitely.
just jump really high, but you feel it's still sort of relatable.
Oh man, yeah, it's still relevant, right? You're still
Yeah.
gonna go back to the ground.
Yeah.
On my last one, I jumped up into the air and I did this like ninja kick because I was just like, man, I'm gonna totally be some ancient Shaolin monk. Like this is gonna be
Exactly.
sweet. And it actually felt like I was suspended for a moment before I came back down, and it got me thinking about this thing where you can wiggle your body in some ways, right? So like you could jump up, have your center kind of high, hold it there as the rest of you catches up to it, and then bring yourself back down. And I think there's some really beautiful artistic
Okay, so
things
that's
that could be
where the
expressed.
flow nerd is coming out of me right now. Okay, because so we've been talking about dance, we're talking about flow. So what is it like to dance? Yeah, if I cut you off, I'm sorry. I'm just dying to know, like, what is it like to dance in zero gravity?
Dancing in zero gravity is a total restatement about what your relationship is to your body and to your environment. It is quiet sensorially, in the sense that it might be the first time in your life, and I feel really clear that it very likely is the first time in most people's lives when they weren't touching something.
Yeah, because I saw your talk, and I found this part really fascinating. When you're talking about, like, you had done sensory deprivation, you had done acupuncture, done all these things, and this was the most like non-sensory experience you'd ever had. And I think you said you couldn't even feel your clothes.
Mm-hmm. Once you enter the state of weightlessness, for each of my flights, I have spent the first 2 parabolas just relaxing. Just calming my mind down, calming my body down, and allowing the first dance to be just the dance of my body, not the dance of my mind. Mm-hmm. And in some like 1960s Air Force and NASA papers, they refer to a position called the weightless relaxed position, where all of your limbs get to an intermediate position. So you're not in extension and you're not in contraction or flexion at all. And so I have just tried to calm down and see if my body can reach that state. And it is really amazing to just actually see what this tool that you've been using for your whole life does when it's on its own.
Right.
And it took a lot. I mean, I've done that 4 times now, four parabolas that I've done this relaxation process. And each time I'm like, oh, I'm getting so much closer. Like I'm totally succeeding at relaxing.
Yeah. right. After all that hard work. Right on. Well, I mean, it must be, is it disorienting as hell? I mean, I've never been in a sensory deprivation tank, but I've heard that sometimes they're disorienting and can kind of create a little mini freak out at the lack of feeling.
Mm-hmm. I have not experienced that. So my training has been sensory deprivation chambers. I mentioned the acupuncture in that thing just because I had done during my last ZRG flight, I did sensory deprivation, indoor skydiving or tunnel flight, and acupuncture all within 2 weeks of each other so that I could compare them.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I do dancing and I do aerial harness work. And so these are all parts of the training. And what happens in weightlessness is that your vestibular system kind of loses track of what's going on. So this is a set of tubes that are inside of your ear. They're actually inside of the bone. And you have one set that determines acceleration in your head. So just like if your head is moving, how fast is it moving? And then you have a different one that's paying attention to your relationship to gravity. And so those are fundamental components in your what we would call proprioception. And this word proprioception just means your experience of your body and your experience knowing where it is, right? So, for example, you could take your arm and put it out, and even if you close your eyes, you could know where your arm is at, right? Mm-hmm. Like I could ask you, close your eyes and, high five me or something like that, and you're not going to maybe we're not going to nail the high five, but
Yeah,
you get close.
I got the basics.
You get it in
Yeah,
the direction.
totally. Yeah, sure.
Right? Now, in weightlessness, if you can't see it, then you have a high probability of losing contact with your body because you have ingrained in all of your experiences every single time of where your arm is at. Every time you've ever asked that question, it's been in relationship to gravity, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you can say, oh, well, if I'm underwater and I'm scuba diving, then that's different. And I'll talk about that in a second and why that's actually the same. But, if you do something like put your arm behind your back where you definitely can't see it, then at least for me and everybody else that I've asked this question of, part of your awareness of the orientation of your arm is related to the torque that you're having to apply through your muscles in order to keep it in that position.
Wow.
Right? That
Okay, sure.
like you're feeling
Sure.
your muscle response is part of your awareness of how your body
Yeah,
is.
like you're aware your arm's not falling.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And you don't get that. That's not an option
Wow.
when you're in weightlessness. And so you have to figure out how to reconnect to your body. Kitsu Dubois says that when you first go into it, you're just all eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to bring it back in to become a part of your body. And I very much have found that exact same situation.
Well, and maybe this is a good time to talk about Kitsu Dubois, but because I wanted to, so what you're describing is so alien to our experience, no pun intended, that how do you possibly train for that?
So I was mentioning that I've been doing all of these other practices, right? Like the tunnel flight and the indoor skydiving. And so for those, the reason that I have focused on, for example, tunnel flight is that in that practice, you're inside of a wind tunnel and it is blowing air up. And, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are on the internet. And so you probably have seen videos of it and everything.
Right.
It's people like floating around inside of this big cylinder. That is an opportunity to practice planning where you're going to be in 3 dimensions as a result of your movement. You also have an opportunity to get your body into positions that you can't comfortably get into in any other or in many other situations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so fast movement planning is fast 3-dimensional movement planning is what comes from the indoor or the tunnel flight. If you're scuba diving, then you have 3-dimensional movement planning, right? That you have to move. You're going to be moving up and down. You're going to be sliding under things. And if you're in a coral reef or a shipwreck or whatever, maybe
Sure.
you're having to get inside of something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that relationship is a little bit more obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to say about this being in the water thing, the one thing that's really different and why it is not a perfect corollary to weightlessness is that you can always push against the water.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's what we're doing. And so when I say weightlessness is this extremely unique experience, it's because you can't push against anything. Then with the sensory deprivation chamber, right?
Okay.
What we're working on is allowing, and I guess I should preface this by saying, what is a sensory deprivation chamber, right? So this is one of these little tiny kind of personal size pool that you get into, and it'll be like 18 inches of water with 1,000 pounds of salt dissolved in it. So you just float up to the top. And if the room is just right, they make the temperature be the same temperature as your body of the water and of the air, right? So everything's all the same temperature. So you kind of have this moment of not getting a lot of sensory input. And that, as you were saying, people freak out about that, right? We're so used to having this constant pressure of information coming in through our skin all the time. And what happens when you tune that down a little bit? Well, you gotta modify how you're tuning your system and how you're expecting information to be coming in. And that mental task is an exceptionally important part of preparing ourselves for doing zero-G dance. And we really got an amazing opportunity in March. I had previously gone and talked with this woman, Kitsu Dubois. She is a zero-G dancer who started in 1990. She is a choreographer, and she's from Paris. She is extremely intelligent. She is extremely capable. She has the capacity to hold this vision and to just keep showing up for it. And the reason that you don't see a lot of other zero G dancers is that every project takes like 4 or 5 years for you to complete. And I talked to her and was just like, what's the deal? Why aren't there more people? And she said, people just don't get how long it takes, and that you're not going to get a 1-year turnaround. And that is hard for a lot of artists to accept.
It's crazy. I mean, I'm just sitting over here as a
there.
professional artist. I'm just thinking, wow, that's incredible.
Right. But if you keep at it, I mean, you've been doing it for more than 4 years. I've been doing it for more than 4 years, right? Like you just keep at it, man, and you have the determination. That's the question. Who wants it, right? Do you want it? Because if you do, then you'll express that by how you spend your time. And so, we had the opportunity to host her for some workshops, and she came and met us at Smith College, which is up in Northampton, Massachusetts. And our 4 zero G dancers got together, and some of the faculty and some of the students from Smith came and joined us. And her lifetime of experience, I mean, she's been doing this for almost 30 years, right? She has distilled it down into something that is comprehensible and something that is teachable and is something that is completely about your personal relationship to yourself, and then shows you how to expand that out and allow it to be an interaction with another person.
Wow.
I've been training for 5 years in my way, and after 2 days of being with her, we came out as different people.
Wow.
So
that's quite a testament.
Yeah, we started out with 2 hours of time in a dance studio where we focused on feeling where our center line is and just really quieting down how we're engaging in movement. And then she started talking about, and this is maybe where I start differing from the dancers in the sense that I don't quite have the language that I find the other people in my group having yet around this topic, but maybe that means I can communicate it to people who are not dancers as well. Right. So if we think about the tone of your body, right? Like, is it rough or is it rigid or is it like totally relaxed?
Okay.
Right. So those are, we call those tones.
Okay.
And so we each have a range, and a lot of people, I think, are probably more geared towards the too tense side, and then some people are a little bit too flexible, and and then there's everything in between. And so the amount of tone that she asked us to try to find was the amount where communication from one part of the body to the other part could happen, but not to have any more engagement than the amount that allowed for communication of the information, in the sense that if somebody was to pull on my hand, I am not so relaxed that my arm just goes, right? And I'm not so tense that my whole body just immediately moves with it. Instead, my body is sequentially allowed access to the information that my hand is being pulled, and it remains engaged enough that it the information flows. And we worked on that for quite a while. And that was a really profound change in my relationship to my own body.
So you've been flowing and dancing forever. How difficult was it to do?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's not a difficult, right? Like that I guess
So there was no struggle. You found it.
Well, I guess, I think struggle, it works with me better than the word difficult.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's where I was at.
Like a problem you're solving.
Right, yeah, like difficult feels like, oh, I'm hammering my thing against this.
Okay,
like trying to get it through.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the struggle or the just the like not getting it, right? Like, it took a number of minutes, and then you have this one moment where you're like, oh, that's it. And then you go back and wait. And I think that's something that contact improvisation and modern dance, I have done a lot of modern dance classes, and that they teach very well, that sometimes you just wait until it's all lined up perfectly, and then you do. And not to feel rushed about it. And not not to just try to get it every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing about waiting and do you feel it, and have you tuned in, and have, you know, you calm down the stuff that you want to calm down, and have you turned on the stuff that you want to turn on. Now let it go. Yeah.
Yeah. So you make sure I understand the story. So she comes to you. You guys invite her to Smith, and you said there were other zero G dancers involved.
Mm-hmm.
No, had they already done the parabolic flights?
So, so yeah, I gotta reel it back a little bit to
Okay.
what Giant Leap is to
right.
answer that question
Okay.
well. So Giant Leap was started by Allegra Sorla-Bell and myself.
Mm-hmm.
She is the U.S. National Coordinator for World Space Week.
Wow.
This is a UN initiative from the UN Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space to engage people in space activities. So every year from October 4th to October 10th, they help people around the country get or have space events. You know, and sometimes it's super sciencey, sometimes it's just folks who like to look at the moon, and that's great, right? Looking at the moon, I'm all for it, man. Let's do it while we can. You know, like, definitely enjoy the moon. And so she has been working in space in that way, and she's a dancer. I think she's danced on a number of different continents, and when we first were introduced by a mutual friend, we realized that we had similar communication styles and we had similar visions, and her vision, you know, for what she's really aiming for is a little bit different than mine. And like the long sense, like we both have very big space artistic goals that we're wishing to accomplish. And they're just like totally parallel to each other and
Nice.
totally with each other. And so we basically were like, okay, are we taking on this project? Yeah. Are you in? Yep. Are you in? All right, let's do this. And so we had been meeting for a year prior to this, weekly meetings, building up the stuff, getting the 501c3, getting, you know, like doing all the little, what's the
Right.
business going to look like? And so now we're at this point where we have thought about who we would like to be our dancers.
Okay.
And so one of them is Toni Craig, and she is a student at Smith. She's working on her MFA in choreography.
Wow.
And she's my partner, and we've been together for 6 years, and she's totally awesome.
Yeah.
And so she has studied body-mind centering a lot, which is an internal practice that really, I mean, I'm as ignorant as a person who's just peripheral to it, right? So
Right,
maybe
sure.
my description is not the best thing to go on, but
So it's a sketch.
yeah, it's a sketch. They study body systems, and they talk about fascia, and they talk about the different rhythms that the organs move upon, and the cerebral spinal fluid pulse and things like this. And she's a massage therapist, and just really, really deeply embodied. And then we have Jeremy Klein, who is another MFA student. He's in Iowa, and super skilled dancer, like totally rocking it. Yeah, can do crazy handstand flippy things that, you know, you know, you watch these things and you're like,
Yeah.
man, I'd hurt myself.
I got coordination envy.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Coordination. Yeah. And then Allegra, and so she's a dancer and a choreographer, and we all do contact improvisation a lot. And so these are the core dancers that we are currently working with. And so when I say our zero G dancers, that's the set of 4 dancers that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So we brought all of them together. We had the Smith College professors and students. And then one of the really deeply moving things was going to a pool, a swimming pool, and we floated around inside of the pool, and we tried these practices of allowing our bodies to be in this somewhat relaxed state that I was kind of describing, the zero G relaxed state. And then we moved into some stuff where we were totally underwater with goggles and nose plugs and interacting with each other, like pulling each other and pushing and feeling how is it that you influence the other person's body and how is it that they influence your body. And having been on 2 parabolic flights so far, I think that was the thing that was as close to zero G as
Really?
I've experienced on Earth.
Okay.
And there's the challenge that, you know, you got to breathe sometimes. And so you pop up and take a little breath. But yeah, her set of practices were deep and thorough And she really moved us along quite a bit really quickly. And she just is such a wonderful person and so passionate about the work and so willing to share. I cannot hold her on a higher pedestal like she made it herself.
She sounds exceptional.
Yeah, really great example of how to interact with other artists who are interested in the thing that you're interested in, right? Because that can be really hard as an artist to accept that other people are going to be doing art that's similar to yours, and then there's the thing where like people can't copy your art actually, right? And you got to deal with that too. But you think they are, but actually they can't.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Totally.
So yeah, her just maturity in that level really showed me a little bit about who I want to be. Right, like you should surround yourself with people who you want to imitate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny. It's like the island artist gets lonely on the island, but then doesn't want anyone to show up on the island.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So I'm dying to know why all this matters.
So we start out as babies, or at least most of us did. Everybody I know did, right? And we start growing up and we start crawling. And we start touching things, and we start tasting things, and smelling, and going out into the world and feeling the world. And it is through that sensory experience that our brains start to organize how we're going to interact with the world, right? And it's literally like that turns into how your neurons organize themselves. Now, there is a theory called the embodied cognition. And this idea extrapolates those base physical experiences and describes how those also develop the foundations of our conceptual and metaphorical worlds. Now, we have a lot of philosophies in the world which like to separate the mind and the body, as if there is a rational or a moral reality that is separate from our physical experience, right? And embodied cognition demonstrates a way to look at this where actually it's all coming from our physical experience in the world. And so one of my favorite kind of examples of how there's this really strong relationship between what we physically experience and what happens in our conceptual and metaphorical worlds is the thing that we all use, that seeing means the same thing as knowing, even when there's not a thing to see, right? Like I could ask you, did you see where I parked my car? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, that's you fully understand that I'm asking you if you have the information about the location of my car.
Sure.
On the other hand, I could say, all right, I just explained all this stuff. Do you see what I mean? There's not actually a thing to see. And the number of examples are nearly endless. So on kind of a deeper level, this starts to question whether or not this type of metaphor is, just a turn of language, right? Do we just use it because other people use it? Or is this a living metaphor that we develop, right? And some people might say, I hear you, right? That's like another, and or I feel you is right. And so, so there seems, in my reading, I'm convinced that metaphors are in fact a living, real thing that we are creating right now, and that this foundation in your physical world, developing the structure of your conceptual and metaphorical and relationship world, is so clear that if we consider how much our physical environment influences our metaphorical world, we could ask a question about what happens when we change the physical environment that you're in. So you can kind of think about, like, if I took all of your neurons and I just drew a picture of them all on a piece of paper, right? And I like reinstantiated you on a piece of paper. And now you have to interact with piece of paper world. And you have to make all your decisions based on like how things happen on a piece of paper. then you would definitely know for sure in every one of your experiences that the sum of the interior angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. Right? Like you would be sure about that. Like every rule you need about the world, you just set it up with that and everything's going to be okay.
Right.
But if I drew you on the surface of a sphere, now those rules about the triangle are actually different. And you come up with an entirely different set of descriptions about how the world actually operates. Now, if I drew you in a gravitational field, you're going to know that you can always pour your coffee and it's going to go into the cup. Mm-hmm. You can know that things that are above other things rest on top of them. And you would know that you could use that not only to describe how you stack your luggage, but you could use that to describe how the relationships are between people in your business. Mm. And you could use that to describe who dominates who else in an environment. Mm-hmm. And that is a direct expression of a physical thing influencing our conceptual and metaphorical world. Mm-hmm. So now the question is, when we take a person who is completely formed in gravity and we take them off of the gravitational piece of paper and we put them in a place that doesn't have that rule, what is actually left of the human, right? Like we've removed the matrix upon which you are drawn. And that's the question that we're addressing. Who are we? And this has an opportunity to kind of differentiate between ourselves and the thing that is the most powerful influence in our life. And not only are the possibilities for internal exploration of our body, as in the internal exploration of every individual's body in their own world, just like thinking this, what is the difference between me and gravity? Not only can that be a really powerful, transformative experience for individuals, but it can start to challenge like, well, why do I have to set a candle up so that it's oriented in this way, right? Like, what if I look at it from the other direction? And what if I lay on the ground and I look at the ceiling and I consider, that direction to be the floor, and just to feel this like crazy juxtaposition of your perception of the relationship between your body and the space around you. These are all valuable mental exercises which are consistent with the type of thought experiments that we perform in physics.
Wow, it's fascinating. I mean, with what you just said, it's like, it's just a whole bigger meaning to the idea of space exploration in a way. I mean, not just space itself, but the qualities of space. Mm-hmm. And just the, it is so, it's almost like we take gravity for granted.
We do.
And you're right. And so much, like just our poetic language, the way we rise up, the way we fall down, like so much of our poetry, so much of the way we describe human experience uses those gravitational ideas. I mean, duh.
Yeah.
Life is gravity. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, to think about. We were talking about this at the party off the mic, but it's just the connective tissue that is gravity, or the experience of gravity. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like it seems like this giant leap program is moving off into. It's almost like establishing something there to pull other people there, or, to bring back. A bridge is such an overused word, but it just almost seems like you're developing this connection to this place of where we don't feel that usual gravity, and then bringing it back, kind of like NASA, bringing back, the discoveries of space. It's just a fascinating concept. The sci-fi nerd in me just wants to know, what would it be like to be born in space?
I think that's a very excellent question that other people are extremely interested in as well.
It's just.
The challenge is how long is it going to be before that kind of happens on accident?
Right.
Right. Like that's a pretty extreme thing to do to a person, or to do to two people, really.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a little while before we get an answer to that type of question. And, you know, because right now there are things like the bone density of astronauts decreases as they're spending time in space, and there are reports about their arteries hardening, and so it looks like being in space is not very healthy for us. And so the question is, how long can you spend there, right? Like some people have just recently spent a year up there, and it's at some point somebody's going to get stuck, and then we're going to find out really what it's like to adapt.
Wow.
And I'm not saying it's a good thing, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's probably going to be an accident. Not an accident like a spaceship blows up, but an accident and like, oops, you know, you just went on this mission that took too long and spaceship didn't get where it's supposed to go, or whatever.
Right.
So yeah. So anyways, yeah,
So connecting the why to the how. What's the how of Giant Leap?
So
What's the future of it?
Yeah, that I ask this question every day. And that's what you have to do. You got to ask the question every day.
Sure.
If it's a question you want an answer to. You know, so
That's a good life lesson, actually.
yeah, you got to keep asking, because you don't know what the answer is going to be, and if it changes, that's okay. It's okay. Find out why it changed, right? So on the immediate docket, we are taking all of our dancers and we're going to Seattle, and we're going to do a couple of weeks of training up there. And that will involve indoor skydiving, the tunnel flights, that will involve the float tanks, dance time, pool time. We already are in conversations with some universities and some businesses there who are willing to donate some time and some facilities. And then if it all really goes well, we're going to end it with a zero-G flight on the Zero-G Corporation's plane. And I think that would just be really exceptional to have 3 weeks of training butted right up against a zero-G flight. On all of my previous flights, I've taken a couple of weeks or a month of, you know, really getting centered prior to going on the flight. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to sharing my ideas about this with the rest of my crew, and to walk them through on a very concrete and clear timeline.
So the audio video geek is wondering, how do you film that?
Yeah, so...
I mean, does it take a special camera to be in...
No, most cameras can go there.
Okay.
I mean, if you can turn a camera sideways and nothing happens, then it's going to be fine up there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The company has GoPros that are just hanging on the walls. And then you basically have a camera person who holds the camera and is also experiencing the same thing that you are, right? And so with our previous training, I have tried to get our camera guy in and talk with him and discuss as much as possible about the zero-G training as we can. And I definitely am focused on appreciating the physical experience of the camera person as much as the experience of the dancers. You know, like I was saying before, when I'm talking about performing in front of people, like, we're all doing this together, right? Like, none of this is in isolation.
Yeah.
It all takes a team, especially anything related to space.
Right.
And so yeah, shout out and lots of love. Like, really am doing my best to appreciate the challenge that we're asking someone to approach there, right?
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, I mean, my background is visual art, and I came through the schools as a sculptor, and who you got to be your photographer was a big deal.
It is. It matters. And
really?
It's worth the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we are really excited about, and is kind of the pinnacle of what we're aiming for right now, is going and doing an actual fully choreographed zero-G dance video that is just focused on dance. And you can think about the most relevant, recent, kind of well-produced artistic piece that has happened is this OK Go video that came out a couple of years ago, and it is fabulous. If you have not watched that, definitely go watch that. And they had 2 Russian dancers in the video, and they did a wonderful job. But we are going to do a piece that is just focused on the dancers, and we have a set of computer programs that I have written in order to simulate the human body in weightlessness, and we can utilize these programs to help develop realistic physics and realistic choreographic expectations when you're in weightlessness. Part of this thing about changing the way you perceive things so much is that the fundamental relationship between your angular momentum, which is something that, we at least have heard of this term before, right? It's a thing that doesn't change once you're floating, and the orientation of your body. The relationship between the angular momentum and how your body is results in rotations that are non-intuitive. And so you have 2 options. One is to go to space and really have a lot of time to play with this. The other is to do something like write computer programs so that we can try to understand it in advance. And that's the much more affordable option, because right now going to space costs about $50 million. So we're going to combine the choreographic experiences or the choreographic skills of some of our dancers with my ability to share realistic expectations through these computer programs. And we are going to express what does it look like when you really come up with a plan to go into weightlessness and to make some beautiful piece of art. And so right now our objective is to accomplish this in October of 2019. It's pretty ambitious, and we're working really hard on it.
It sounds really ambitious.
Yep. Well, you gotta
space.
Well, right. The set of ideas with a timeline that you are actively working to accomplish is how you set goals.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing. We're setting our goals, and we're working really hard on getting there. And so that's the thing that we're most excited about sharing with everybody.
Well, as I listen to this project, and I'm not really a science guy, but I am, and you're challenging me and inspiring me to make the connection again, to reconnect all these things. It's just been blowing my mind listening to you talk about this project, and I'm so glad that you came on the podcast to share it with me and to hear about it. And I'm sure I'll get loads of questions from people about why didn't you ask this and why didn't you ask that? But I just find it so fascinating. And I don't know, I got to say, I don't like to believe in tribes anymore, but you do feel kind of like tribe to me because I know you from the flow world and stuff. And so there's this enormous sense of awesome that I feel for you because you're one of us, just a lot smarter. But you're going out and doing this thing, you know what I mean? And you're trying to take dance into space. And I know, I'm so glad we got into the why, because I understand it's so much more than just dance and body control and that sort of thing. But it's just it's just really what you're helping me do is sort of broaden my whole perspective of what space exploration is.
Good.
That it's more than just about can we get to Mars,
mm-hmm.
And so
it's about who will we be?
Absolutely.
When we get to Mars, right? Absolutely. That is a relevant question that we should be very interested in.
Yeah. Well, let's connect. Let's give a chance for people, and I'll have all this in the liner notes of this podcast and everything. But how do people find out about the project if they want to do their own research on it? How do they connect to you? What's your social media?
Yeah. So we have. If you didn't know this, you can get a .dance account. Or a .dance
I
URL.
I saw that, and I thought it was some weird redirect or something.
Oh, no. We got giantleap.dance.
Okay.
And then you can find us on Instagram, also giantleap.dance, Twitter, giantleapdance, and Facebook, giantleapdance.
Right on.
And then you can email us at outreach@giantleapdance.com. And we're really, really enthusiastic about engaging with people through our social media accounts. And so if folks are into connecting with us on there, we understand and value that this is a real group project. And I want to be appreciated by and deserving of the appreciation of all of the people who have to come together to bring this together. And everyone I know, everybody in the dance community, everybody in the science community who I'm hanging out with, they're all a part of this, whether or not they're like actively pushing on it right now. And our many friends out there in the world online are a huge part of it. And that's, you guys are who we're trying to communicate with, right, and who we're reaching out to. Mm. And we hope that this really enriches your lives. And so if you, really are feeling what we're talking about, please connect and reach out and let us know that it's, resonating with you, because it's really important.
Well, absolutely, man. I mean, I was excited to hear you talk about it. I was excited on Sunday night to hear you talk about it. And even now, I'm just even more excited. And just to echo something that Adam said, he's a good dude. You could go to the website. Every person that's involved in this project is just top of the field, it seems like, or at least just that eager rookie astronaut kind of, personality, just to be bold and go there. And just to echo what he said, one of the cool things about the internet and what it is now is that we pass the information to each other. And you have a chance to help other people find out about this awesome project by sharing it, liking it, whatever. It's free. It takes 2 seconds, and you might learn something. And you might want to be a part of the project at an even greater level than just supporting it on Instagram. So I really encourage you, just take the second to just click on these things, because sometimes we get so depressed in the limits of our own world that it's good to go into that, no pun intended, outer space of our, our comfort zone and learn about all these other projects. So thank you, Adam, for coming on here. I wish you luck with it. And thank you guys for listening to the Future Hero podcast. This is one of the interviews I do. I'll be bringing back episodes and all kinds of meditations. But thank you so much for pressing play. Take care, and we'll see you next time.